Hi, Jennifer Lynn. Welcome to Struggle to Strength.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here, and I'm excited to talk to you today. But before we get started, let me just quickly introduce myself. In case we haven't met before, my name is Mary Beth Simone, and I am the founder of Niche Partnership Consulting. And my business was inspired by a personal struggle that I was able to turn into a strength through my business. And through this platform, my goal is to highlight the struggle to strength stories of my guests in hopes that it will help you, the listener, to connect your struggle to strength story. So, welcome, Jennifer. I'm excited to talk to you today about how your near death experience prepared you for 2020.
Yes.
So, before we dive in, can you tell us a little bit about your background and the work that you're doing now?
Sure. So I started my career as a litigator, trial lawyer for about a decade. And then I know we're going to go in a little more detail with this, but I had a near death accident. And unfortunately, due to my physical and mental injuries, that took me out of practicing. And I ended up starting a business that was consulting focused, that has grown into mainly a public speaking business. So today I go into companies, law firms, conferences, and I do keynotes and workshops and things of that nature. Of course, a lot of it the last few years has been virtual, but some of the in person's coming back, which is great. And so that's really my focus now.
That's wonderful. And if anyone is with us live, feel free to drop an emoji or a question or a comment into the message box, and I will relay any questions to Jennifer Lynn so that we can get her to chime in on any thoughts that you're having. So, Jennifer, I just wanted to mention that we initially met, I think it was early 2020 before the pandemic started. So you had posted something on LinkedIn, my favorite social platform, and you had shared your story and
Mhm.
invited people to connect with you. And I reached out to you and said I would love to meet you, and we met for coffee in Philadelphia on, I remember, a rainy day, and right before the pandemic started. So that's kind of a shout out to using LinkedIn to increase your network.
I think it's
Um,
also a shout out to sharing your story because I mean, I remember putting that up and I remember the response being pretty overwhelming in a positive way. And you were one of a number of people that reached out that said, I want to share this or that, or let's get together. Or I'd love to connect, or thank you for sharing. And I always feel like that's amazing when that happens. And that's a lot of the reason I do what I do. So yeah, I remember it specifically. We were at the Starbucks at 18th and Market, which unfortunately I think maybe has closed permanently since COVID. And it was a rainy day. And I feel like it was right around the holidays. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was right around the holidays of December 2019. So right
I
before
think,
the pandemic.
yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. And I was just so honored when you said, yes, we can get together. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was so thrilled to meet you.
Well, I was
Um,
thrilled because I remember that you were at the time really kind of launching everything that you're doing now. And now here we are a few years later, and you've really made a great success of it. So, it's kind of interesting to watch your progression and know how it started and see that in a few years you've been able to do this. So congrats on that.
and I just love that we've been able to develop this relationship and be able to, highlight each other here and there throughout the years that we have known each other as well.
Absolutely.
So, can you share with us what the initial impacts were for you of the pandemic on your life, your business, and your mental health?
Sure. So, at the time that COVID hit, my business was in such a good place. It was one of those great trajectories where I was really starting to get all of the major kind of speaking that I had hoped to get. I was booked and busy. I was happy. And really, as COVID started, I watched almost all of it initially go away because that was a time, it seems strange now that we're talking a few years later because so many things have moved to virtual, or as there's been new variants, they've moved back to virtual. But if you think back to the beginning, nobody really knew what was going on. There was sort of a sense of panic in the whole country, and things were just canceling. So I was just getting like calls and emails from clients saying, we're obviously not having this conference, or this isn't happening, or this thing we thought we were going to have in 6 months, we're just canceling it. So it wasn't even like we might schedule it for a virtual or we're going to rethink it. I just kind of watched a lot of my business go away. That was really hard. I know I'm not the only one, but it's just, as a solopreneur, as somebody that took a while to build it to where it was hard. It was very hard. And I picked up a lot of consulting work actually. And then as things started to level out, I was doing a lot of virtual speaking over COVID, but obviously not really any in-person speaking. So that's kind of how the business side transitioned. I have to say, from a mental standpoint, initially, and I say initially, right when the country closed, there was that sense of uncertainty everyone was going through, but I kind of had a sense of relief almost. I know that may sound awful to say, and I don't mean to minimize anything any of us or families or anything have gone through during COVID, but I was at such a pace with my life, going places, 5, 7, 8 things a day. I never spent any time in my house. I didn't see my husband that much. And I think it really forced me to kind of have what a lot of people had, which was sort of a reassessment of, how do I spend my time, and what do I want my life to look like? I was so burned out. So those first few weeks, I was actually kind of elated. I was like, wow, this is great. I don't have a schedule. I don't have to be anywhere. I can focus on things I want to focus on. And then I think an initial, depression set in of just, oh my gosh, I've lost all this business. They told us it would be a few weeks, and now it's looking, that's not going to be the case. And obviously the few weeks turned into a few months, turned into a very long time of having all of our lives, drastically altered. So I would say after that first few weeks, I kind of took a spill downward.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that the whole trajectory that I've observed of your what happened in your business has been really a fabulous success story, but we'll get into that later. I mean, the beginning was just, it was filled with so much uncertainty, and we had not experienced anything like this before.
No.
So can you share with the audience the story of your near-death experience?
Yeah. So a long time ago, more than a decade ago, I was on the University of Pennsylvania campus as a pedestrian, and I was hit and then pinned underneath a truck. At the time, I was, a successful trial lawyer. I was very involved and social. I was a newlywed, and obviously, an accident like that, you're blessed to survive, but at the same time, it alters every aspect of your life. So I had very serious physical and mental injuries, including a traumatic brain injury, and I went through several years of various, therapies, surgeries, rehab, mental treatment, PTSD, anger, depression, anxiety, problems in my marriage. I mean, anything you can think of that would result in a life-changing accident like that. And ultimately decided to leave the litigation job that I had. I was at a wonderful company. They tried their best to accommodate me when I came back part-time against all of my doctor's wishes. I still wasn't allowed to go back to court. So I was in more of a desk role. And that actually made me a lot more depressed because for me, the reason I personally went to law school was to be in court in front of people. And I loved interacting with people. So not being able to do that anymore was really, really challenging. And I think sank me in a deeper depression. So ultimately decided to leave that role with really no plan. I mean, I really was just at a rock bottom place. And I would say within 6 months to a year of that, that was like in 2011, I started the business that I have now.
And was there a specific point during the pandemic when you connected the dots to the fact that you were better prepared for the isolation that was happening because of your experience with this accident?
Absolutely. So with my accident, I would say there were several years where I was just what I would call in a dark place. Obviously things are a lot better. This was a long time ago, but I could not get out of it. It was the first time in my life I felt like I'm really unprepared to deal with this myself. I really can't believe how much help I need to function like what I would call a quote unquote normal person. I mean, having days and days where you don't know what you did with your time, and getting dressed and brushing your teeth and showering is too much. Or like, if one of my therapists said, why don't you just try to go to the CVS today and pick up your prescription? That was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do that? I mean, going from a very productive adult professional, who was involved and active, to somebody that couldn't do those basic things was really tough. But I feel like with my accident, it took a very, very long time for me to get to a place of, quote unquote, normalcy again. And with the pandemic, I do think I would say, between a few weeks and a few months where I was really in kind of a downward spiral. It brought me back personally to a lot of the times that I was home recovering from different surgeries and feeling very lonely and isolated and angry, because that was over so many years and so many surgeries at a time where people were all out living their lives. And when I say people, I don't just mean strangers. I mean my husband, family, like everybody was kind of going on with their lives. And I was recovering at home, isolated and depressed. So in my mind, at the beginning of the pandemic, I think it took me back to that place of isolation and loneliness. But then I realized everybody was in the same boat. It really wasn't the same, because we were all going through it. And it wasn't just me that was isolated. And I think one of the turning points for me actually was I was watching Good Morning America one morning. My whole routine was altered. My day would basically start and sometimes end with TV most of the day, until I got on a routine. But I was watching Good Morning America, and they had this segment on Dr. Lori Santos. She's a Yale professor, and she teaches what people nickname the happiness course, but it's called, I think, the science of well-being. And she was talking about how people manage, and a lot of the things we can do to make ourselves happy when things aren't going well. And they decided to offer this course online through Yale for free. And I decided I really could take advantage of this, because nothing else seemed to be working to kind of get me out of my funk. So I started taking her online course, and I feel like that was really a turning point for me.
Oh, that's wonderful. Um, and I remember during the pandemic seeing you on a lot of TV segments, sharing tips and tricks for virtual networking to keep people fresh and to give them ideas on how to improve engagement with virtual webinars, that kind of thing. Now, was that part of an existing visibility strategy, or did that just come up organically?
So I had done some local segments before the pandemic, but I think during the pandemic, I did a ton more. And it was definitely a strategy on my part. I mean, I think like a lot of us, I was worried about, I'm not seeing people, you don't stay top of mind. Who's going to hire me? How am I going to stay visible? So I was definitely racking my brain at home to think about ways that I could still stay visible. And it was definitely at least a part-time, if not full-time job, to try to figure out how to do that when we were all stuck in our homes. So, I had some relationships with a few different stations. Thankfully, they, had me come on for a number of segments virtually, which actually, even though it was cool, involved its own level of stress, because, you're home. When you go into a studio, you just show up and talk and give some tips. But at home, you have to be concerned with your setup, your lighting. I have two crazy dogs at home. So there'd be the begging of my husband in early hours. I'm on TV this morning. Shut these dogs up. I don't care what you have to do, So there'd be a lot of stress with that, but it was still really nice to find a way to interact with people and stay top of mind and have people remember, what I offer. And like I said, hire me for some consulting work and things like that. So that was definitely a strategy on my part.
They were great segments, and I remember, I think it was like around New Year's, the props that you had for the Zoom. It was wonderful. I loved it.
Yeah, that was a strategy too, because I feel like on the virtual platform, you almost have to be more animated, and there has to be more exciting kind of visuals, because you're not interacting with people in person. So I was always looking for ways I could make it kind of more fun and silly, even if it was a more serious topic, just something that would be more engaging.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And if anyone's with us live, and if you have any questions, drop them in the comment box, and we'll address them. And then when we first met, you shared with me that a TEDx talk was in the making, and you were able to deliver that. So tell us more about that, how that all came together.
That was a journey. So in the course of my recovery, I had cognitive and speech issues and memory issues and all kinds of issues related to how my brain functioned for a long time. And I was told in therapy I should reconsider a career that involved public speaking, even though essentially as a trial lawyer, that's what I had done for about a decade. I didn't want to hear that, and I'm very stubborn. So, nobody told me I couldn't do it or I wouldn't be able to do it, just that I might want to rethink it. And there would probably be things that would be easier for me than to try to go back to that. So, of course, I did the opposite, because that's the kind of person I am. And I do love an audience and I love public speaking. So, to me, the biggest goal, was not only to start the business that focused on public speaking and grow that, but I need to be on the TEDx stage because that's the biggest platform to me, that I can have. And I had a story that I really wanted to share with a larger audience about, trauma and overcoming challenge and resilience and disruption and change and all the ways that I had overcome everything that I had went through that are not, something that's just somebody like me who's gone through a car accident, has gone through. There's so many people that overcome other challenges in their life and are looking for inspiration and motivation to do it. So I just felt like I had something to say and I needed to say it. And I tried, for 5 years to get a TEDx talk. Rejection after rejection after rejection. And it never actually deterred me. I mean, there were times where I got certain rejections where I would say, I can't believe I got it again. And then I kind of picked myself up. It never occurred to me to stop trying. So I think when I had seen you, it was within a few weeks of finally getting it after all the time I had tried. And, without going in a great deal of more detail, because I know there's other things you want to talk about, I was supposed to deliver it the week the country closed at the University of Arkansas. And obviously that did not work out. And I was given a choice to wait a year and see if they would come back and do it live again or tape it by myself. And I ended up taping it by myself here in Philly in a studio during the pandemic and getting it released in June of 2020. And so that was also tough. It taught me a big lesson about setting your goals and having them accomplished, but not necessarily in the way that you wanted or hoped, because I never really got that big stage moment where I had the TEDx logo behind me and the audience and the feedback. But it has been really life changing to put it out there, especially with the topics that I was tackling. And it was towards the beginning of the pandemic. And I feel like it was just the right message at the right time.
I agree. And I thought that the video of your talk came out beautifully.
That is
Um,
thanks to Anne Marie Casey and her team. Shout out to AMC Photography Studios. She's local to the Philadelphia area, and she's done a lot of work with me over the years for photography and branding, and really went to bat for me when I was given that choice, knowing how hard it was for me and how long it took me to get to that place. And really, being in a studio with her and her videography being my only cheerleaders when I was like really upset and vulnerable, and also had a lot of anxiety about even leaving the house during lockdown, and all of that involved before the vaccines. And just her telling me, do it again. And I'm like, what do you mean do it again? It's so emotional. I don't want to do it again. Do it again, and it just pushing me to be my best. So I can't thank her enough.
oh, it was wonderful. And where was the location of the recording? It just looked fantastic.
It was her studio in Bryn Mawr. She has since moved her studio, but I believe her new studio is actually in the same building, but just in a different location that she leased in the building.
It came out beautifully. And I will add a link to the TEDx talk on all of the platforms in case anyone wants to check that out.
Thank you.
So Jennifer Lynn, how has your business been impacted or changed by the past couple of years?
So actually right now I would say I'm way busier than I've ever been, and I'm not complaining at all. It's, some days are tough, but it's a blessing and I'm happy to be this busy. How has it changed? Like I said, during COVID, it was almost exclusively virtual. And while as things went on during COVID and virtual speaking became more and more the norm, I was happy to have the business. I was still a little saddened because I really do love being in front of people live. So I'm happy now that we're kind of in a place where some of my business is virtual, some of it's in person, some things are hybrid. At least there's a mix. Would I prefer it to be all in person again? Yes. Probably that won't happen, because the world is just different now. So I think that's absolutely how things have changed. But I was happy to be busy virtually, and I'm happy to have some things in person again because that's where I think I really shine and engage with people.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like, especially for public speakers, being in person is so important because we love that feedback. We love the energy in the room.
Absolutely.
And it's just different virtually.
It's different. I mean, before COVID, unless somebody demanded it, I would never ever do slides. I'm just not a PowerPoint slide person. I would just have some note cards or get up and speak. And I loved doing that and just kind of like talking on the fly. And, not that I wouldn't think about things beforehand, but just kind of reading off the audience and things like that. And I would say that was also a really big change during COVID with so much virtual speaking. A lot of the companies wanted your slides ahead of time, and then there wasn't really room to necessarily vary from that, and you didn't see your audience, and sometimes they couldn't even get off mute and ask questions. You would just have to have somebody read you the chat, and it was just a very, very different world.
Yeah, for sure. So do you think that you developed any new strengths since the pandemic?
Yes, I definitely feel like even though if you talk to a lot of people in my inner circle, they would say I'm everywhere all the time. I'm not disputing that, but I am saying to myself that when I think about my life pre-COVID, I actually have scaled a lot of things down that I would not have scaled down but for COVID. There was a couple boards that unfortunately I decided to get off of midterm, like before the term ended, and decided to make a decision to never be on any boards again, at least for the immediate future. Things that were taking my time that weren't moving me towards better mental wellness or to the goals that I have for myself. I'm just trying to let go of. And I think I've gotten a lot better at saying no. If something isn't going to be fun for me, where I'm going to gain energy from catching up with friends and things like that, or it's not business related, I just try not to do it anymore. I try to only go to maybe one or two things a day or one thing a day, as opposed to the 5 to 8 things I was doing a day before COVID. So I think that's actually made a big difference. I think it's become easier for me to say no. And it's become easier for me to focus on the goals that I want to focus on and not feel any guilt or badly about that.
That's great. And I think that bandwidth became a much bigger attribute that we paid attention to since the pandemic, because sometimes it's like, it felt like everything's okay, but there's a level of stress that we're managing with all of the unknowns and whatever's going on with our family. And yeah, so
Absolutely.
it became different. Yeah, it was a different scenario. And since we have a minute, can you talk to us a little bit about the pageant that you were in?
Sure. So I would say since my accident, I like doing crazy new things that are out of the box. I mean, I don't like status quo. I always feel like doing new things or new challenges makes me stronger and makes me feel like I have the confidence to do other things, even if in the moment it's scary and I regret that I signed up for it. Um, but the pageant was one of those things that came, kind of came my way that I wasn't considering. It's not as though I sat here and said, at some point in my life, I want to be in a pageant. But a friend of mine locally, who's also in the speaker circuit, who's also a lawyer, had done this pageant last year and won. And so I knew about the pageant from her, and she encouraged me to get involved. It's called Mrs. Classic Universe, and it's for women over 40. So I love that, first of all, that it's showcasing women over 40. So I ended up entering, and I went to the world finals in July in Las Vegas, feeling like I actually did hit a low point in the few days of rehearsal I was out there, feeling, oh my gosh, I'm so over my head. And all the other women here are poised, and a lot of them have coaches and custom gowns and experience doing pageants. And I didn't have any of that. And I was thinking, how did I get myself here? Maybe I should just pack up and go home. But ultimately, I'm not a quitter. And I thought, at least I'm going to stay here and finish. And I won the whole thing, which was a surprise to myself and everyone. So it's actually really cool because now I'm Mrs. Classic Universe for 2022, 2023. It gives me a lot larger platform to talk about, what does a beauty queen look like? I'm a 49-year-old plus size beauty queen. What are the traditional definitions of beauty? How can I challenge that? Invisible injuries, that's a major, major thing that I talk about because, after my physical injuries and when I wasn't recovering from surgery, there are a lot of people that really don't know how to act, even though they want to act the right way and they want to say the right thing when you have invisible injuries and you look okay. People will say things to you like, well, you seem fine, or, you're having this conversation with me. I guess you're doing better. And they mean well, but, as somebody going through things, it actually makes you angry. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about people who are going through things that are not seen. So that's something I really want to highlight during my reign, along with the issue of mental wellness, which I think as a country and the world we've seen is a lot more important now post COVID, and like a lot of what people have gone through. But I think this is the right time to kind of challenge all of that and really explain to people what it means to go through that and how they can help people in their lives that might be going through the same thing.
Yeah, that's wonderful, and I love that you point out that even when you were had arrived in Vegas and were in the pageant, you were feeling like you didn't belong, like you were in over your head. Because I think that even when we are on the precipice of some great accomplishment, we still can feel that way. And it's important for people to know that, even when we see that you have achieved this amazing status, that you felt that way when you were right in the middle of it. There's
Absolutely. And
nothing wrong with that.
you hear people say that, do it anyway or do it scared, and
Yep.
I can't agree with that more. Sometimes it's really hard, I mean, there are times I'm just having these discussions in my head where I'm like, what the F was I thinking,
Right. Right.
but do it anyway. Cause I feel like, in the few months I've had to gain some perspective on the whole thing, it has made me more confident and stronger. And it's made me feel like if I can be a 49-year-old beauty queen, I can do anything, so do those things that scare you.
That's wonderful. And you can do anything. I am positive that you can.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about your business. What is happening in your business? What are you focused on? Are you promoting anything now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely regarding the pageant looking for platforms in the next, platforms and events during the next year until I go out and crown the next queen next July. So looking for opportunities to speak a little bit about my journey, or even just to show up at different events where having, somebody in a fancy crown and sash, interacting with your attendees would be a benefit, so please reach out, whether it's virtual or in person. If you're in the Philadelphia area, that's definitely something I'm promoting and trying to schedule as part of my reign and responsibilities. With my business, I'm definitely focused on corporate, speaking. So this year there were a couple companies that hired me to do series, and that's great. As a solopreneur, I mean, you and I were talking before we started this interview, to have things that are booked out where you're not hustling for business is amazing. So, I'm kind of getting to the point of the year where I realize I have to stop focusing on all my clients and do some marketing so that I can get more things booked. But, looking for opportunities, I have probably 4 or 5 signature talks. Some of them are obviously around communications and strategic networking, but some of them are also more focused on the motivational speaking, resilience and leadership and change, and all of that. Obviously, the details are all, on my LinkedIn and my website, and you can reach out to me. And, we mentioned before the interview, in addition, I started teaching at Wharton this semester. So that's been taking time, but it's been amazing. I'm teaching business communication. So yeah, a lot of things. And then probably the biggest thing is that I've been talking about it for more than 5 years, finishing a draft of my book. So I hope to have that out next year because I turned 50, and I would love to have it out while I'm 50 and while I'm doing my pageant reign and all of that fun stuff. So it's going to be called Always Bet on Yourself. And I'm hoping to have it out next year.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm so excited to read your book when it's ready. And I feel like you are a role model for me in business. I aspire to do so many of the things that you have already done, and I love being able to watch what you're doing next. And I'm continually surprised by what you tackle. Um,
Thank you.
yeah. And what is the best way for people to connect with you if they would like to learn more about, if they'd like to talk to you about a speaking engagement or to work with you?
Sure. I mean, you can always email me directly at jennifer@purposefulnetworking.com. My website, which is purposefulnetworking.com, you can check out more details about me. And there's also a link on there, it's like a contact form if you want to go that route. and schedule something with me to chat about an engagement, you can do that as well. And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at RU Networked, AREYOU Networked. And I just joined TikTok. I was resisting it, but a lot of people told me I should start doing business videos, which I think I've been on there a little over a month. I haven't done any business videos. I'm just trying to get used to the platform, but that is my plan. So I'm on there as Jennifer Lynn Speaks. So I'd love you to follow me because I only have like 30 followers and I'm trying my best. So we're hoping to get that up and running in 2023 and make that more of a business channel.
That's wonderful. And I will put links to all of these connection opportunities in the comments for on all of the platforms, as well as the TEDx talk.
Great. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for being with me today and for sharing your story with the audience today. I love that you're able to be so candid about what you've experienced and how you have turned everything into an opportunity, and you've leveraged your experiences in your business and the way that you show up.
Thank you. And I appreciate all of your support. And I'm so proud of everything you've done. And, it's great that even though we don't see each other much, especially the last few years, that we can root for each other and watch our accomplishments. And just, I'm excited for what the next year will bring for both of us.
I am too. I am too. And I love being connected to you, Jennifer Lynn. Well, thank you. And we'll see everyone next time on Struggle to Strength.
Bye. Thank you.